dialogue in various African and European capitals leading up to the EU-Africa High-Level Forum on the Green Economy and Investment to take place by hybrid mode in Lisbon and online on 23rd of April. All are invited to join. Green and growth were often seen as contradictory in the past, but that is precisely what the future is demanding, in Africa too. How to move in that direction is at the center of a crucial discussion for Africa, for Europe, and for the world at large. At the high-level forum, we expect to have my Prime Minister and the President of EIB, but also the United Nations Secretary General and representatives from African governments, the European Commission, the African Union, the African Development Bank, and Mr. Mo Ibrahim, founder and chair of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation and co-founder of the Africa-Europe Foundation. This intercontinental dialogue begins with a series of events in Africa and in Europe that we call the Green Talks, aiming to focus on specific topics under the Green Initiative, Africa's Green Future, New Investment Pathways towards Sustainable Inclusive Development. Today, the specific topic will be Manufacturing in Africa for Africa, Sustainable and Inclusive Manufacturing. This is a permanent question, but that is rendered even more topical by a number of current challenges like COVID and opportunities like the setting up of the Continental Free Trade Area in Africa. Africa needs to create jobs, needs to insert itself in the global value chains. But if Africa needs to create itself for a new economy, or to recreate itself for a new economy, it will have to do it in tune with the realities of the 21st century, including concepts like sustainability, limited carbon footprint, and limited wastage. To discuss this, we brought together a diversified and balanced list of speakers that I'm sure will enlighten us on the subject matter. Beside myself, the speakers are, in order of appearance, Mr. Jim Hodges from the European Investment Bank, Secretary of State Francisco André from Portugal, Ambassador Rina Kionka, head of the EU delegation in South Africa, and the moderator, we hope to have Mr. Moeletsi Mbeki from SAIA. Given that he's having some difficulties, he may be replaced by the remarkable person that is Mrs. Elizabeth Sidiropoulos, the CEO of SAIA. We'll have with us on the panel Mrs. Brenda Mabaso, Chief Director, Business Regulation and Governance from the Department of Economic Development of the province of Mpumalanga in South Africa. Mr. Derek McNeil, EIB Specialist for Sustainable and Circular Industries. Mrs. Nilgün Taş, in Industrial Resource Efficiency Deputy Director from the Department of the Environment at UNIDO in Vienna, in Austria, from the United Nations. And Mr. Chifipa Mango, the Chief Economist at SAIFSA, the Steel Engineering Industries Federation of Southern Africa. In the program, we'll have first the opportunity to listen to the Portuguese Secretary of State and then to the EU Ambassador. Then we have a panel discussion moderated by Mr. Mbeki. And again, Mr. Mbeki is a person of many talents, from engineering to the media, a scholar and a businessman who comes from a family that has given more than its fair share for the transformation of South Africa. In the course of discussion, there is the possibility to address questions to the speakers writing on the Q&A function, which the audience is encouraged to utilize. You will also notice that the logo of this event includes two trees. It's an European oak and an African acacia. Side by side, different but equal, both green. This is an encapsulation of what we are doing with these initiatives. We hope to assist in strengthening relations between the two continents and in the opening wider the doors for Africa's green future with sustainable, inclusive development. I'm now inviting our partner, the EIB, to intervene. Over to you, Jim.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, and thank you for that warm welcome. Welcome to the Portugal Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs and Cooperation, Mr. André, and also to EU Ambassador, Dr. Rina Kionka. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to be part of this event and have the pleasure of co-hosting this event with the Portuguese Embassy in South Africa. This is actually the third in a series of events in this region that we are co-hosting, leading up to the important high-level EU Green Investment Forum taking place on the 23rd of April in Lisbon. These green talks and investment forum are particularly important to the EIB as the Bank of the EU. In this capacity, we've made a strong commitment to our EU member states towards meeting the challenges of climate change. And in the EIB, the EU has an instrument at hand that can help to make a real difference now. We actually have a long history of working, being in the European financial architecture with operations in more than 140 countries globally. In Africa alone, we achieved record lending levels in 2020, signing more than 4.5 billion euros, and half of this was to the private sector. A great strength of our lending activities lies in our ability to deploy EU sector expertise in partner countries like South Africa. And climate is an area where the EIB has built a significant expertise. The EIB has operated on the continent for over 50 years and will continue to serve as a catalyst for the green economic growth in Africa. In so doing, we need to focus EIB action on investments that have a significant impact on decarbonizing existing systems. The EIB has already demonstrated this in a number of impactful innovative projects in Africa, such as the Ouazzazate Solar Energy Complex in Morocco, the depollution of the Kitchener Drain in Egypt, Climate Resilient Infrastructure Program in Mozambique, Smart Climate Agriculture Projects in Malawi, and also the Green Oceans Initiative, which the EIB launched in 2018 with our development partners KfW and AFD. And these are just a small fraction of the projects we're doing in this area. Over the past years, we've invested in South Africa and in the region in a wide variety of sectors, including energy, water, transportation, health, and SMEs. All of these projects with a consideration towards climate adaptation and mitigation. Manufacturing, which we're discussing today, invariably cuts across all these sectors and in itself faces a number of challenges and opportunities. Consequently, the private sector will be instrumental in the green transition in South Africa. The EIB places private sector development, the engine for economic growth, at the forefront of its work. A good example of this is a recent investment we've done in South Africa with a company to expand the manufacturing of reagents for testing and treating endemic diseases like dengue, measles, and yellow fever. But ultimately, the EIB is here to invest in the future of South Africa. And for this reason, I very much look forward to today's interventions and to the discussions. Thank you very much, Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Dean. It's encouraging that you can share with us the concrete projects that you have just mentioned. One thing about the many events I've witnessed is that sometimes you hear talking, and you don't see much result. These green talks are not just talks. There's money and project management and the notion that we are down to concrete things. And the IB presence is testimony to that. With these words, I think we move to the next speaker. Mr. Secretary of State, if I may invite you to share with us your thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and dear friends. Good morning to all. I'm very grateful for participating today in this green talk organized from Pretoria. Listening already to the two previous speakers, it has been already enriching and overwhelming experience. I would like to thank Mr. Moleti Mbeki for, if he can reach us, for steering this discussion and for his vital contribution of SAIA to this subject. And also, I would like to express our deepest appreciation to my dear friend, Ambassador Manuel Carvalho, and to Jim Hodges from the EIB for making today's session a reality. We are entering now on the final weeks of the Green Talks. This is a record-breaking round of intense and substantive debates organized in different African and European capitals, all the way from Helsinki to Pretoria, to discuss investment and financing opportunities for a green transition. It's a full steam exercise of climate diplomacy and outreach, building momentum to the high-level EU-Africa Forum on Green Investment to be held on the 23rd of April in Lisbon. And in this regard, I would like to share with you a few thoughts about the ongoing Portuguese presidency of the Council of the European Union. I will briefly address our priorities for the current semester and how they translate to the global agenda and to the European Union's relations with partners. It won't come as a surprise that from the outset, our priorities are presided by the need to reinforce resilience and the citizens' confidence in Europe's social model. That is reflected in a values-based union of convergence, solidarity, and cohesion, also of paramount importance. Against this backdrop, climate transition and digital transformation are some of the main axes of the Portuguese presidency, namely a resilient Europe, a green Europe, a digital Europe, a social Europe, and a global Europe. If you go on internet and read our priorities, you will see that Africa emerges at the forefront of the global Europe chapter. As you can see, it was only natural that Portugal and the European Investment Bank joined hands in organizing the high-level Green Investment Forum on the 23rd of April, as well as these green talks leading up to it. This sequence of events is about two continents working together and side by side to achieve common objectives in terms of sustainable development and green investment. It is difficult to imagine other initiatives that will better reflect the overall objectives of the Portuguese presidency. Africa carries little responsibility for greenhouse gas emissions, while it is paying a high price for the dramatic consequences of climate change. It's an unfair and undeniable reality that must not be repeated as we shift to a new paradigm through the green and energetic transition. It's all happening at a point in time where a small number of events will be decisive for a successful transformation in Africa. Firstly, the entry into force of the African Continent Free Trade Area. Much has been said already on this groundbreaking and visionary initiative, and by far from more competent people. I will just mention a few megatrends that, from our experience, can be expected through the implementation of the continent. Someone has the microphone connected, and this is making some echo. As I was saying, I will just share some of our thoughts coming from our experience of what can be expected from the implementation of the continent FTA. A rise in and extra-continental exports. It is anticipated that for Africa, this will be particularly significant in manufacture. Simplified procedures of an FTA will also have direct translation in higher margins and wages. Reduced competitiveness of informal trade will lead to better protection of workers and an issue of particular concern in addressing the gender gap. Overall, you should expect African economies to grow and become more diverse, inclusive, and globally competitive. A second dimension I want to highlight is the need for a balanced, fair, and inclusive post-pandemic recovery. It's unlikely that for African countries will benefit from recovery packages as the one we see emerging in some advanced and emerging market economies. This said, the current pandemic has exposed the world's common destiny, and it's foolish to believe that effects of the pandemic and its recovery can be reined in if some are left behind. The quest to harvest all these different dynamics puts us before a unique and historic opportunity. Engaging in resilient and sustainable transition will likely be the hallmark of future relations of cooperation between countries and regions of the world. And it is why any partnership between Europe and Africa must lead this trend and not overlook green transformation and sustainable growth as guiding imperatives. The Portuguese presidency of the Council of the European Union is working to guarantee that such focus will be mutually beneficial and looks forward to the next EU-Africa Summit. We know today that besides an environmental concern, green investment is mostly an opportunity for economic and social development. particularly in Africa. The underlying transformation of a successful green transition can be easily translated to growth and job creation, as well as more competitiveness. It can bring unprecedented transformation to economies that are characterized by excessive specialization. It is a once-in-a-lifetime chance to accelerate a long-thought process of economic diversification. Indeed, economic diversification is perfectly aligned with the driving forces of green transition and what it entails in terms of energizing local value chains, incorporation of added value, reduced dependency, efficiency gains, attraction of productive investment, job creation, and generation of inclusive growth and income. To support Africa's green transition and reformative potential, it is an imperative to all of us. It needs ambition, but also innovative and encompassing resource mobilization to pool the financing and incentives required for such a transformation. Green and sustainable have also become buzzwords to investors looking for opportunities in the financial markets. We must seize the moment to bring together the contribution of all possible actors. Public money, obviously, but also private sector, international financial institutions, banks and investment funds, development agencies, and multilateral actors, as well as the European Union. The European Union has just approved under our presidency the new Neighborhood Development and International Cooperation Instrument, Global Europe, or just NDC as a nickname. It's an overall allocation of almost 80 billion euros for the 2021-2027 period, of which at least almost 30 billion will be for sub-Saharan Africa. As regards of supporting the green transition, the NDC is very much aligned with the EU's international commitments, including the Paris Agreement, setting a spending target of 30% for climate objectives. Ladies and gentlemen and dear friends, I will conclude as I started, by praising the organizers and participants for an inspiring discussion that we are having and that we'll have today, and from which I will bring home important lessons as we position ourselves in a transformation process that will necessarily be long. Its success, however, depends on the decisions we take now. And so, as a final remark, I will simply reaffirm to you the motto of the Portuguese presidency: time to act for a fair, green and digital recovery. Thank you very much, and back to you, Ambassador.
Secretary, thank you very much for those words and the notion this is the time to act. Without further ado, may I invite our good and dear friend from the EU in Pretoria, my dear friend Rina, to give us her thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Manuel. Secretary of State, Mr. Andre, representing the presidency of the Council of the European Union. Dear Manuel, my good colleague, Ambassador of Portugal, dear Jim of the EIB, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. I would like to congratulate, first of all, the Portugal's presidency of the rotating council, the rotating presidency of the council, as well as the EIB, whom we fondly refer to as our bank, and that's not a proprietorial statement, but it's a expression of a familial relationship that we're all one EU family, and the EIB is part of that family. And also let me congratulate partners in 20 capitals for their determination to unlock green business and investment opportunities between Europe, South Africa, and Africa as a whole through strengthened collaboration. My Portuguese colleague referred earlier to the fact that these are not just talks, there's money, but as we know, money talks. So there's a connection here. And let me come back to what the State Secretary just finished with. My main message to you is very similar. Today, my message is that in the EU South African strategic partnership, we have a really powerful tool that can allow us to make a difference. And so let's use it to unlock sustainable value chains, and integrate our economies further in pursuit of a better life for everybody in South Africa, and in the EU. I'm convinced that working more closely together will help us open up a raft of opportunities for a just and green recovery and more jobs. And as I like to note early and often, the EU is South Africa's most important and most reliable trade, investment, and cooperation partner. South Africa's exports to the EU added up to 19 billion euro in 2019, and that's over 350 billion rand, thanks to our economic partnership agreement. According to South Africa's Reserve Bank, 40% of all foreign direct investment in South Africa comes from the EU, with recent investments in renewable energy and water efficiency boosting this FDI stock. Over 1,000 EU companies are active in South Africa, and experts whom we have commissioned to give their advice have confirmed that these EU companies are creating skills on a significant scale, and that they're creating also important benefits for previously disadvantaged groups in this country. EU budget support and other cooperation programs are investing some 280 million euro, around 5.5 billion rand, into SMMEs, skills development, and technology and knowledge transfer. Together with partners in South Africa, we're currently discussing how best to use that portion of the next EU 7-year budget that is set aside for South Africa to support innovative approaches to green issues and jobs. That's our main remit here. Allow me to share a few EU experiences as inputs to today's discussion on how we can further join forces to unlock sustainable value chains. As a baseline, EU players have produced some over 60,000 high-value green innovations since the early 2000s, more than any other G20 partner. Notably, South Africa is highly successful in collaborating with the EU research institutions, and it benefits from our various research programs. It's something that I like to call the pearl of our strategic relationship. Turning to industry, the EU's strategy in this area is designed to drive the green and digital transitions towards job-rich, inclusive growth. For example, while a quarter of industrial robots produced globally are made in the EU, we're particularly proud of the fact that we're global leaders in producing something called the collaborative robot. That's a robot that doesn't replace a worker, but enhances the skills. I see great value in maintaining and deepening our bilateral policy dialogues between the EU and South Africa on the fourth industrial revolution, on jobs, and on climate action. And it's no accident that these three are together. Let's look for a moment at what the EU is doing on green financing. We are taking significant steps on a rule book for sustainable finance. We've put forward green bond standards, and we're about to present detailed rules to help private investors finance the transition to sustainable assets. Together with China, India, Japan, Kenya, and major global financial centers, we are participating in the International Platform for Sustainable Finance. And we hope that South Africa will join us on this platform. And let's talk about batteries. The European Battery Alliance, that comprises some 500 industrial and innovation actors, is currently building 15 new gigafactories to be able to power at least 6 million electrical vehicles by 2025. So 4 years from now. Batteries can be expected to grow to 250 million euros in terms of market share by that date. And last year and the year before, so 2019 and 2020 alone, investors put some 85 billion euro into the new value chain, adding 1 million new jobs in the EU. Here in South Africa, the EU finances Green Cape, the CSIR, and tips to explore, together with South African SMEs and exporters, how we together can build the global value chains for batteries, green hydrogen, and circular products. Finally, I'm excited to share with you that during the first upswing of the pandemic last year, the EU partnered with Green Cape and local private investors to mobilize the Green Outcome Fund. While this fund was set up by South Africa's Treasury before COVID-19, we were able to use this vehicle to channel emergency support to green SMEs during the pandemic. And the part that I'm particularly proud of is that our local beneficiary SMEs have told us that this support not only enabled them to, stay above water to weather the pandemic, but also to create new jobs by responding to a new demand for green goods and services. So let me end the way I started, telling you that now is the time to use our EU-South Africa strategic partnership to its fullest, because together we can drive the uptake of new innovations, develop businesses, create sustainable jobs, transfer skills, and enable a just and green recovery. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rina. Thank you very much for those remarks. I learned a lot about batteries. Thank you. And indeed, batteries are the future in many ways. So it opens the door to a very different kind of mobility for one, and that will have an enduring effect. So yes, we have to move into batteries and other aspects that you also have mentioned. We're coming to the moment of opening the panel. Unfortunately, I don't see Mr. Beck with us, if I'm not wrong. So perhaps I would invite Elizabeth to take over and introduce the panel. Elizabeth, are you with us? Unmute, please. Elizabeth? Yeah? No, suddenly you're not with us. Sorry, I think unmute is going to be the word of the year when we come to back to that. You are muted, Elizabeth.
Ambassador, I think Elizabeth's having a struggle connecting. I'm going to check with her now. Do you want to just go ahead and introduce the
Thank you, Sarasa. Sorry, friends, for this. No. Nope. Sorry for this.
It may be because of the earphones.
Elizabeth, would you try without the earphones or?
Ambassador, maybe you should just introduce the next speaker while we try to get Elizabeth on.
Well, I hope that Elizabeth can resolve this matter in a moment. But meanwhile, perhaps I would introduce the panelists and invite the conversation to start. So as I mentioned it already, we have Mr. Chifipa Mango, the chief economist at SAIFSA, the Steel and Engineering Industries Federation of Southern Africa, very much involved in everything that has to do with industry and manufacturing in South Africa, and if the name goes, is right, also Southern Africa. So we have Derek McNeil, EIB specialist on sustainable and circular industries, Ms. Nilgun Tash from UNIDO, Industrial and Resource Efficiency Deputy Director, and Brenda Mabaso, Chief Director, Business Regulation and Governance from the Economic Development Department of the province of Mpumalanga. In practice, I was going to invite first the various speakers to have a short intervention, each of them, and then we open a debate. That debate, in case we continue to have this problem with our friends from SAIA, both. Well, I understand Elizabeth is back with us, so she should be able to moderate. Otherwise, then perhaps I may invite Jim Hodges to do so from Luxembourg. Elizabeth, are you with us?
I am with you. I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me? You can't hear me.
Loud and clear. There we are. Okay. I just introduced the speakers and the panelists and invited them to take turns at giving a few remarks, and then we open the debate. But if that's okay with you,
no.
Or in that case, Elizabeth, take that, please.
Okay. So my apologies again. My computer decided to go on the blink, so now I'm doing it on the phone, and I hope it will work. But the functionality is limited because of what I can do on the screen. Anyway, let me from my side and from SAIA's side thank the Embassy of Portugal and the Portuguese Presidency of the European Council for the opportunity to work together on this event, and also, of course, the European Investment Bank. I think the point has been made in the introductory remarks about the importance of a green future for Africa, and I think a number of really significant points raised by the Secretary of State, Mr. Andre, who I must acknowledge, as well as by the European, the head of the ambassador of the European delegation to South Africa, specifically relating to the relationship between the EU and South Africa and the opportunities for cooperation. This roundtable, of course, focuses on shortening the supply chain. The speakers have been introduced. Let me not take up more time, and hopefully I can bring up some additional points in the discussion. Let me start first with the chief economist at SAIFSA, the Steel and Engineering Industries Federation of Southern Africa, Mr. Chifipa Mango. Clearly, SAIFSA is an important association driving manufacturing and the inputs into manufacturing in the region. But there are also, of course, associated challenges when we talk about how we green manufacturing in Southern Africa and indeed the continents. Perhaps from your perspective, Mr. Mango, you could elaborate a little bit on some of the challenges and issues that your members and yourselves are engaging on in terms of integrating more sustainable business models to build up a green manufacturing capacity in the region.
Thank you very much, moderator, and thank you to all the my panelist colleagues, as well as all protocols observed. I recognized the secretary, as well as the ambassador. Well, we represent almost over 1,200 manufacturing entities in South Africa, and they are all from the metals engineering sector, which is composes about 29% of the manufacturing sector in terms of production in South Africa. It's quite a diverse portfolio of entities. We're ranging from the steel industry to vehicle parts manufacturers, and also to the whole entire value chain of the manufacturing sector in South Africa. And we're quite knowledgeable in terms of what's going on the South African perspective with regard to the manufacturing sector. The challenges are quite wide, from the issues of investment in terms of declining in terms of employment, and also in terms of the trade patterns across the globe with other countries, especially the European Union, as well as other global regions. So, can you hear me? Because I think there was a miscommunication there, connectivity problems. So we're facing challenges, especially when it comes to the issue of global carbon emission. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, you okay? All right.
Chifipa?
Regard to the production base, renewable energy has likely been the key emphasis from the government point of view in terms of trying to look at how best we can improve our production patterns in terms of renewable energy. There's been a lot of investment and also cooperation at industry level in terms of trying to reduce the carbon emission from the production point of view. The steel industry, in essence, is actually taking quite a strong leadership position in that aspect. We've got key industries, for instance, such as ArcelorMittal in South Africa here, which is part of our membership, which is doing quite a significant job in terms of reducing the carbon emission with regard to the production patterns there. And a lot of investment has taken place in that category from that institution alone. Almost in the 2018-2019 period, a massive investment, almost close to 200 million South African rands, was actually put across in terms of and also where the industry production patterns are actually being affected. The entities are now taking a position towards moving away from the local
Jim, what can we do?
Yes, I think there's a
participants that are not on speaking to please turn their videos off because of the bandwidth. And just the person speaking can have the video on, please.
Hello.
Yes, carry on.
Yes, there was a disruption in terms of, but anyway, so we've seen that kind of improvement going on with regard to the provision of incentives from government side point of view to encourage more participation in terms of reduction of carbon emission at plant level. So that's something I think we quite impressed from the industry point of view in terms of what we're seeing on the South African market. So I think with those few words, I'll leave it there, and then we can engage further in other matters. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Great, Chafipa, thank you very much. And I wonder whether the reintroduction of load shedding this morning hasn't affected connectivity across Gauteng. I suspect that is part of the problem. Makes the importance of renewable energy even more critical. Thanks very much, Chafipa. I think we've got most of the points that you were communicating to us. Let me then move on to Darragh McNeil, who's the Sustainable and Circular Industries Specialist at the EIB. We've, of course, heard some initial remarks from Jim about the work of the EIB. Clearly, this is very much a critical vehicle for mobilizing finance and investment into projects, both in Europe and certainly in the context of Africa. Perhaps, Darragh, you can touch a little bit on some of the priorities related to climate change. Of course, circular economy dimension is becoming an even more important element of engagement. Also in Africa, I know South Africa and Rwanda and a couple of other countries have created an alliance around the circular economy. But let's hear a little bit more about some of the priorities, some of the challenges, and critically, of course, about the opportunities, which must be, of course, very closely linked to the way in which Africa also wants to affect and realize the African continental free trade area, which is premised on creating regional value chains.
Great. Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you also to the Secretary of State and the Ambassador, and also Saya, for facilitating this discussion and allowing me to contribute. And maybe just to build a little bit on the introductory remarks from my colleague Jim Hodges. I think historically the bank, the EIB, has quite a strong legacy in investing or providing access to finance for climate action projects. So historically, we are around 25 to 30% of our investment portfolio is focused around climate action. Clearly, our ambition is to greatly improve that. I think we, like all, I think the members of the panel recognize that this is a critical decade for the environment. This is the next 10 years are really critical in terms of climate action and environmental sustainability. And that mirrors a little bit of the EIB's ambition in the next 5 years to grow from the level of 25 to 30% to up to 50% of our investment portfolio in climate action and environmental sustainability. So that echoes a little bit of I think the Secretary of State, Andre, referred to this transformation process that the sectors are going through, but also the EIB is going through a transformation process to focus our efforts quite significantly on climate action and environmental sustainability. That being said, also to build a little bit around what Mr. Mango was referring to in the steel sector and the component sector, a lot of the effort that have been made up to now are around climate action in terms of climate change mitigation, such as renewable energy, I think, which is the case was referred to, but also climate action or climate change adaptation. In the future, we will be adding a number of different focus areas around environmental sustainability, which will allow us to capture more areas around water and marine resources, transition to the circular economy, which I think is the point that you were referring to, Elizabeth, but also pollution prevention and protection and restoration of existing ecosystems. So I think we're going to see a more balanced focus in the future between climate action and environmental sustainability. We are focusing a lot at the moment on traditional climate and circular economy type projects with legacy organizations. But we're also seeing an emergence of more business models that are centered around circular economy. So organizations that are looking to exploit the opportunities within circular economy. And in textile sector, there's a classic sector where we're seeing quite a lot of activity in that space, also reflecting the pressures of regulations that are coming down the pipeline in the EU in terms of managing textile waste flows, but also seeing it also in the sector that Mr. Mahango was referring to in the steel and automotive components, where we look at recycling automotive components and reintroducing those into the value chain rather than downcycling those type of components. So in summary, I think we're going to see in the next number of years a much stronger ambition in terms of the EIB's involvement, but also a broader type of scope that we would be looking beyond climate action and exploring bigger opportunities in environmental sustainability opportunities. And that as a brief introduction, I'll hand it back to you, Elizabeth.
Thanks very much, Darag. I mean, obviously the dimension that you referred to around restoration of ecosystems and similarly related projects around environmental sustainability are obviously of particular importance to Africa. The whole issue of adaptation and the opportunities that might also create in job creation and so on, I think are critical if we're going to deal with some of these socioeconomic challenges of the continent. Great, thank you. Let me then move on very quickly to our next speaker, Nilgun Tash, who is from UNIDO, the UN Industrial Development Organization. She is the Deputy Director in the Department of Environment for Industrial Resource Efficiency. Nilgun, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good to have you with us this morning. Again, a similar question to what I posed to Darag around the EIB. I mean, specifically, if you could unpack a little bit some of the priorities in Africa for the organization, specifically around obviously the issue of inclusive and sustainable development in the region, and perhaps some projects and some specific case studies that might be useful for the conversation. Over to you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Good morning, Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, and please also accept my thanks, sincere thanks for the invitation to contribute to these green talks. Most of you know, but just let me say again that UNIDO is the specialized agency of the UN that promotes inclusive and sustainable industrialization, which we shortly call ISID. We promote ISID because it creates shared prosperity, jobs and incomes, leaving no one behind, and advances competitiveness, while at the same time safeguarding the environment. Inclusive and sustainable industrialization also contributes to all SDGs, SDG 9, but all SDGs directly and indirectly. And industrialization is at the top of the sustainable agenda of all developing countries, including those in Africa. For instance, it's embedded in the African Vision for 2060, in the objectives of the Third Industrial Decade for Africa, a multi-partner UN initiative which UNIDO coordinates, as well as the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, because this free trade agreement can only yield benefits if African manufacturing expands and is competitive, both regionally and globally. So, in a nutshell, our priorities in Africa are to contribute to diversification, value addition, and productivity increases in manufacturing, as well as the promotion of widespread innovation, adoption of new and green technologies, supporting, as a result, green jobs and skills development, including in digital technologies, and all of this while ensuring environmental sustainability and leaving no one behind, inclusiveness. The way the pandemic has shown, and scientists have confirmed, that due to our current consumption and production patterns that are hugely wasteful, we are having a huge impact on the climate, changing it to the worst, degrading our lands, creating alarming biodiversity losses and pollutions. At the top of the agenda today is climate change, and everyone is focusing on the energy side of climate change. But also research has shown that even if we implemented throughout the world, everywhere, renewable energy and energy efficiency measures, we can still only have 55% impact on, reduce our impact on climate change only by 55%. The rest, the 45%, is embedded in what we consume as food. Please think, today you got up, you had some breakfast, the food, the houses we live in, the infrastructures we enjoy, the transport, mobility that we use every day, our household goods, capital goods through which we manufacture, and even services. We transform resources, biomass, metals, non-metallic minerals, and fossil fuels. So because all of these are embedded in our products, it is a great waste to discard any product when it reaches its end of first life. So as a result, we promote circular economy, just transitions to circular economy as a means to, as a way to inclusive and sustainable industrial development in Africa. And because industries create innovation, industries create business opportunities, and so on. And the circular economy practices such as repairing, reusing, remanufacturing, recycling, industrial symbiosis, in effect, resource efficiency measures and circularity that comes with that is the way to go. So as a means to achieving inclusive, sustainable, and inclusive industrialization, we promote also in Africa just transitions to circular economy. I think I will give examples in my next intervention. I just wanted to state how we look at inclusive and sustainable industrialization in Africa. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. I think you know, you make the point about, you know, reflecting on your day and what you throw away on a daily basis just by doing things that you think, you know, are part of normal life. And I think once one starts doing that, one actually realizes how much waste is generated, and how much of that can actually be brought back into the economy. Of course, one of the biggest challenges for African countries in this dimension, and also in the shift away from fossil fuels, is how do we deal with the issue of stranded assets. But that's another conversation. Okay, let me then move to the last panelist, last but definitely not least, from the eastern part of South Africa, from Mpumalanga, from the Mpumalanga Provincial Administration, Brenda Mabaso, who's the Chief Director in the Department of Economic Development in the Provincial Administration for Business Regulation and Governance. Of course, Mpumalanga it's a great province in terms of its natural beauty and ecosystems, but it's also one that is challenged by, of course, serious pollution and so on. But I think there is significant green potential, and there are a number of projects and ideas on the table in that regard, which is why we thought it was so important to bring you into the conversation, Brenda. It's really great that you could join us. Let me hand over to you now.
Okay, thank you very much, Elizabeth, and presidency of the Council, all the partners present here, and members of the Diplomatic Corps, and fellow participants. I am indeed greatly honored to be part of this very interesting session on Green Talks. As introduced, indeed, I'm Brenda Mabaso, and currently with the government of Mpumalanga. And I have been involved with a number of provinces, but I then ended up choosing to settle in Mpumalanga, and only because this is the only province where when the sun rises, then the people work. Thus, it is known as the place of the rising sun. Indeed, Elizabeth has indicated that this is one province that is known for its beauty. Now, Mpumalanga lies in the eastern part of South Africa. I'm just illustrating for those that have not had the opportunity to visit this beautiful province. It is bordering beautiful countries such as Eswatini and Mozambique. It constitutes about 6.5% of South Africa's land. Despite our small size, but you'll be amazed at the amount of work that takes place, especially with regards to climate change initiatives that we are doing, which I will talk about. In South Africa, actually, we are also having provinces around us, that is Limpopo to the north, Gauteng to the west, and Free State to southwest, and KwaZulu-Natal to the south. Why I'm emphasizing this point, it's just to emphasize that we are strategically located to do any business. And for us, therefore, the subject on manufacturing in Africa for Africa becomes very relevant and critical because of our strategic position in the African region and the opportunities in terms of regional integration. What made this session quite relevant for us and important for Mpumalanga is really the projects that I will be talking about, which I will really share. What is it that we are doing, and how is it aligned to today's agenda? Definitely, you would know that one of our comparative advantages or sectors where we have comparative advantage is in the agriculture sector. Mpumalanga is an agricultural province. Thus, in Mpumalanga, we do not just see agriculture as a way of life, but it's business. In the engagement with agricultural businesses, we therefore cannot ignore the threat of a world or a country or a province without water. What then this means is that we are challenged to ensure that we find innovative ways of preserving water. We need to find innovative ways of doing business in the agriculture sector in a manner that is taking responsibility of the fact that water at some point will become a challenge. Private sector, therefore, in this regard, becomes our key stakeholder as we engage and work towards sustainable inclusive development. You would note that water, unlike in energy, you cannot have alternative water sources. Therefore, there are a number of initiatives that the province is putting in place in terms of ensuring that we preserve the little that we have, because it is really critical for us that we note that if there is no water, then it will be very difficult for us to do business in the agriculture sector, which then is creating a number of jobs in the province. So the transition into clean business is critical, and it is indeed everybody's business because it has implications for even our people at a local level. I should therefore emphasize that one of the lessons for us is that as we are transitioning into clean business and engaging business on this issue, on these issues, it is very important that we promote the concept of public-private partnerships. Indeed, alone as government, we will not be able to achieve a sustainable and inclusive development. So what I'm trying to echo is that in whatever we're doing with regards to sustainable inclusive development as a province, we really promote and encourage partnership with the private sector. In illustrating that Mpumalanga is indeed coming up with innovative ways of doing business, because we also are aware of the importance of the subject of really looking at sustainable ways of doing business. We note the challenges of climate change. Therefore, I will illustrate by sharing some of the projects that we are doing with private sector, indicating the importance of partnerships in our initiative towards sustainable and inclusive development. You will also note that a bulk of South Africa's forestry plantations are located in Mpumalanga. So it was for this reason that I was saying, you may think we are small in terms of size and availability of land, but they are really quite important sectors which we are contributing to as a small province, and forestry is one of those sectors. Now, as part of promoting sustainable and inclusive manufacturing, it is therefore important that as a province and as government, we collaborate with key captains of industry in this sector, like your SAPI, your SAPCOL, your York Timbers, in really ensuring that we work together in promoting a sustainable development. For instance, to give you an example, one of the projects that we are doing with the company known as SAPI is the promotion of the growth of biomass projects using all the waste products coming out from the forestry plantations, from the products of lumber and timber, which we are saying if we are to practice environment-friendly practices, ensuring a clean environment, it is therefore important that we use the products that are considered as waste in the sector to generate alternative energy. We have signed an MOU with SAPI on the implementation of the biomass project, and as we speak, there is already a plant for implementation of this biomass, and it is being commissioned. We are hoping, as you know, that we also have the issues of challenges of Eskom with load shedding. Now you will note that if we have such partnerships with the private sector, It will therefore be able to provide and relieve ESCOM, because the energy that will come from this biomass will be able to supply the grid. So these initiatives are very important, not only for government, but also for the private sector to ensure that we continue having sustainable industries in the province. Also to illustrate the importance of partnerships for us, these partnerships are not just local, but we also encourage global partnerships also which forms or is relevant to the subject of today, because it is part of our pathways towards sustainable inclusive development. And as an example to that, the Premier of the province in her State of the Province address in 2019 announced the intention of the province to partner with, for example, the US-based non-governmental organization known as Fresh Ministries to jointly introduce and implement a climate smart, sustainable food production project using innovative agri technology called aquaponics farming. Now, this is just to indicate that there are therefore opportunities in Mpumalanga for bilateral or partnerships with other global, with countries globally. I'm therefore using this opportunity to say we are available for really signing MOUs with other countries to try and provide innovative solutions in promoting investment in the province. One of the key sectors also, Elizabeth alluded to that, quite often when we talk about our mining sector and we talk about mining in Mpumalanga, the first thing that people jump to is, oh, the pollution in Mpumalanga, because we are considered a hotspot when it comes to pollution issues. I would just then like to indicate that as government, this is also a worrisome area. It is the truth that Mpumalanga has a challenge of air pollution. Note that Mpumalanga indeed, as a result of having almost 12 power stations and over 20 mines, it would then automatically have a problem of pollution as a result of the activities of these industries in the area. Actually, it has been said also that Mpumalanga accounts for over 84% of South Africa's coal production. Therefore, the activities around the mining of coal is also what is causing a problem for us, which is why then really we note that through the activities of and operations of the coal-based power stations or power generation industries and other operations of coal and manufacturing activities such as petroleum and chemicals, because you know that we also have Sasol in the province. Now, you know that, yes, it has been good and an advantage for Mpumalanga to have these industries, but the consequences of not really adapting to innovative, sustainable ways of doing business will result in higher consequences. And we are noting that and experiencing that as Mpumalanga. Some of the risks are irreversible to the surrounding environment. However, I should say that we are making efforts as government to look at what can be done to address this challenge. For instance, the province has come up with a provincial air quality management plan that has been developed to ensure monitoring of the emissions. To this far, the province has put 5 air quality monitoring stations to monitor the emissions. And also the national government has come to the party. They have also put other additional air quality monitoring stations. This is just to indicate that we are quite aware that the consequences of not really adapting to to innovative ways of doing business. Therefore, despite having had the benefits of having these manufacturing companies, but the consequences will be dire, thus we are putting some plans in place. There is also work that is being done on renewable energy, which is the transition from coal to renewables and alternative sources of energy. However, we are also having challenges that as we come up with the strategies, we also need to be able to monitor that there are no consequences, disruptions, because if I give you an example that as we talk about the transition from coal to cleaner energies, one wonders then as to what would happen to all these 12 mines that are employing a number of people in the province. You start thinking about the job losses that will happen. You also start thinking about the business opportunities, because currently there are contractors and service providers that are supplying these mines. Therefore, what is a challenge more for government is that as we look at all these alternative solutions, we also need to look at how then are we going to ensure that the transition is just and does not disadvantage the people and or businesses around the areas where these mines are. Definitely, we do not want to foresee a situation where these towns become a ghost towns. In that regard, then once again, the issue of partnerships become important, because the government with other community-based organizations, with the municipalities, is working with the mines in terms of looking at putting or developing transition strategies to minimize the devastation of the closing down of the coal mines. In 2017, the province, also as a means of trying to mitigate what could be a devastating situation, started with the development of a climate change adaptation strategy. It is one thing to have a mitigation strategy in place, but we all know that change does not often come easily. Thus, an adaptation strategy is also being developed to manage the transition from the past to the future, the clean future that we want. My observation, however, as we are working on all those efforts as a province, is that if we are to reduce climate change vulnerabilities, we need to mainstream climate change. It is no longer just an issue of environment, but also it has developmental implications for it. The challenge that I'm foreseeing is that people talk about climate change, but this is not being incorporated in the plans or climate change plans, or it's not being implemented. And a good example, part of the work that I have been doing is assessing the plans of municipalities, that the integrated development plans, the annual performance plans of departments. And surely I have noted the limitation that in these plans, you will find little that is said about climate change, whereas this is an issue that needs really to be mainstreamed, and it has to be made an important subject matter. Whilst pollution and climate change pose a number of risks, there are new manufacturing sector opportunities that have been identified in some of the value chains. All we need to do is to identify the silver line in all this, which we consider as a challenge. In that, I would then indicate that Mpumalanga has identified a number of new industrial and manufacturing opportunities. And to name a few of this, we are saying that we need to be working towards the establishment of new industries that would manufacture components for the new sectors that are to come as a result of climate change. An example of that, we are working on projects on wind turbines, solar panels, cleaning detergents, etc. We are working on reskilling of the people that will be affected by this sudden transition. And to also say the least, as part of the reskilling, there is, because we also try to be proactive, there is a company that is known as South African Renewable Energy Technology Center, that's Saratech, that is looking at the development and provision of the state-of-the-art training programs and modalities to meet the quality standards of the industry. In that way, if we take the people that will be affected by the closing of the mine and integrate them into these programs, we will then minimize the unemployment and devastation that may take into that place. In closing, Chairperson, I want to indicate that the province of Mpumalanga is ready to work, as the slogan says, that as soon as the sun rises, we are ready to work, despite the challenges and threats of climate change and pollution. There are strategies in place. There are investment opportunities which we would like to partner with strategic partners like this platform is providing for the province. Thus, we appreciate the invitation because it actually gives us an opportunity to indicate what we are doing as a province. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks very much, Brenda. I think highlighting some critical issues, both in terms of challenges as well as in some of the things that are actually taking place around manufacturing a new more green manufacturing. What I want to do now is, we've got about 10 or so minutes. I'm not too sure I can see any questions, partly because of my technical skills, but I'm sure the ambassador or Jim can interrupt me if there are. I wanted to pose two questions to the panel. The first one relates to the topic, which is the shortening of supply chains. Clearly, COVID has reinforced that reliance on one single supply line, particularly one that might be extensive and long, is really is a case of putting all your eggs in one basket, and that's really not a good idea. So I think the thinking has been around how do we diversify supply chains, and that certainly creates a significant opportunity for Africa at a time that the continental free trade area is taking its first baby steps from the 1st of January into operation. What is critical about that, of course, is the promotion of cross-border value chains, cross-border manufacturing. So it is not just about concentrating manufacturing in countries that have a history in Africa of some manufacturing and industrial activity, but really spreading the goods out. So my question to the panel, and you can take it as you wish, is how do we promote and what are your respective organizations, in the case of EIB, UNIDO, doing around creating more such projects across border? Secondly, and I think this is very important, we heard earlier from the EU ambassador about the fact that we have over 1,000 European companies present in South Africa, and they're important hubs in value chains. But a question that I would have, and also my chairman, Mweletsi Mbeki, who was unable to join us, is what kind of interventions do we require to encourage more African manufacturing businesses to emerge? And I know that some of you have touched on the issue of small and business SMMEs. And then one last question is around the issue of regulations, and this is really focused more specifically on our European colleagues here. Clearly, there is a host of regulations that is emerging in the interest of advancing the climate change agenda and creating incentives and disincentives for that. but there are potentially unintended consequences of sometimes of these regulations for companies outside of Europe. And I wonder how both at an intergovernmental level, but also at the level of organizations, some of these can potentially be mitigated. Let me leave it there. There are 3 questions. You guys can pick them up as you wish. And then if there are additional questions, we can take a short, quick round. Who wants to go first?
Okay, I can go first.
Okay, excellent.
Okay, all right. I hope this time we're not going to have any disruptions. I've moved in a different room. Okay, I think I want to touch on the area of regarding to the supporting. How can we take this forward when it comes to the supporting ring with regard to developing manufacturing across the continent? You know, one of the challenges we face is on the issue of infrastructure. You can talk about the supporting value chains, but the issue around supporting infrastructure is very key on the African continent. And not only on the African continent, but I think from the experience we're having in South Africa here, it's also quite massive, especially on the railway side. You know, to transport material, let's say where we get iron ore for the manufacturing of steel, from, let's say, Tawazimbi, to bring it across to Johannesburg, which is the major hub for, let's say, ArcelorMittal in terms of production of the steel. It's quite a massive task from the cost point of view, as well as from the railway infrastructure point of view. And then if you bring that dimension to the connectivity across the continent in terms of the supply chain, you find that no, you're actually limited in terms of the supply chain because of the lack of infrastructure connectivity. One of the legacies we face on the African continent when it comes to infrastructure is railway development, which is one of the cheapest when it comes to transporting of material or supply, is that we still got a legacy where our infrastructure in terms of railway development is always facing the sea. In other words, the materials we have from the mining point of view, which feeds into the manufacturing sector, is mostly geared towards exporting rather than benefiting of the African continent. So even the infrastructure still faces those legacy issues. So we need a lot of connectivity from the source of raw materials at country level to the manufacturing base within the country. That's the challenge that I think most of the African economies are actually facing at this stage. The other issue is maybe from the solution point of view, the creation of more special economic zones. I think we've seen some good examples of how special economic zones have been utilized, especially when you look at the Chinese economy, how it was built. The whole industrialization process of the Chinese economy was built around special economic zones. So there has to be more encouragement of special economic zones, which are focused towards one, interregional trade or inter-country trade, as well as within the country trade point of view. Because one of the things you face is that within our sector, for instance, the metals engineering sector, we feed in 60% towards the construction sector in South Africa alone. But also we feed in 10% towards other manufacturing sector on the South African economy alone. So whenever there's disruptions in that regard, like for example, how COVID affected our industry, it also affected other industries such as the construction sector and other manufacturing sector, because their inability for our industry, metal engineering sector, not to be able to produce had implications towards production in other segments of our economy. And that's something that needs to be watched. So the entire value chain of the metals engineering sector is heavily reliant on the mining products, as well as also feeds into other manufacturing sectors. So that whole value chain, I think, needs to be looked at in terms of how the supply chain is actually interlinked. So we see special economic zones as one of the key engines in terms of encouraging much investment in the metals engineering sector. The other issue I think we need to look at is technology advancement. You know, COVID has taught us that production can be disrupted because of human beings. And that's something we have to now to look at in terms of addressing how best can we have an industry that is able to operate even though there are no humans involved. So advanced technology in terms of manufacturing base, I think needs to be encouraged. The use of more robots, like what is actually happening in countries such as China, how they are able to really continue production is something I think that needs to be looked at from the African point of view. The other area I think that maybe I want to give my colleagues opportunity also to speak, but it's also in terms of ability to develop the necessary skills in terms of our industrial base. We may have lessons to learn in terms of how the type of skills that are more common in the manufacturing base. And one of the things that we're lacking, especially on the African continent, is the engineering skills. And I can talk from the South African point of view, where you're seeing that engineering skills is not only in terms of the pool of what is coming in, but also we're facing an aging workforce in terms of the metals engineering sector. So that also needs to be looked at from the policy intervention point of view on the African continent. But I think I'll also then wind up with the issue of investing more in renewable energy. You know, there's a huge fund that has been created through the IDC, the Industrial Development Corporation, in terms of encouraging industries towards investment, towards products that can be utilized in the renewables production. And I think there's some areas within South Africa which are earmarked for those renewable projects investments, such as the Northern Cape province. So that's something I think needs to be looked at in terms of addressing the challenges we're facing from the supply chain point of view, but also encouraging more investment in the manufacturing base in South Africa. You know,
right. Can I, Chifipa, I know you've got lots of lists there, but yes. I'm just mindful of the time. Can I stop you there? Let me go to the others, and if we have a couple more seconds, I'll come back to you.
Thank you. No, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Chifipa, okay, Derek, let's take it again in the sequence in which people spoke. Derek,
no, thank you for the opportunity, and I'll just build on what Mr. Mahango referred to. I think we all recognise the exposure that we've gone through in the last year and a half that shows how fragile some of these supply chains are. And there will be obviously actions and initiatives coming from this to try and make more robust supply chains for the future, specifically in the sectors that are heavily impacted. And we were heavily exposed to healthcare, for example, or healthcare equipment is one of the key areas I think that we're all familiar with. I guess the concern I would have is that humans are traditionally we have quite a short memory. And I think that, if we look back, once we get to the next crisis, we may quickly forget about the lessons we should have learned, or we have learned from the pandemic. And we will come back to, in the kind of the non-impacted sectors, such as the one that Mr. Mahango represents, we come back to the basics of unit economics again, where we look at where can I establish my footprint, where I have the highest volume closest to my main markets. So I think we have an opportunity. It's quite a limited time frame I think we have, and I think the solutions, I think Mr. Mahango touched on a number of those key solutions, is to try and rebalance that unit economic equation again by the use of new technologies, by digitalization, by upskilling of talent that we have locally, to make sure that when we make those supply chain decisions, that the incentives are it's a level playing field, that we're looking at localizing as much of the higher value type activities as possible, local to the local market. However, I think we have a limited time to actually implement this. So I think what we should be trying to do is to make the component around direct labor cost less significant by using new technologies. And I think you referred to them earlier: robotization, cobots, collaborative robots, to enhance people's skills rather than to replace people, to make sure that it is a sustainable and inclusive future that we're aiming towards. I guess my concern, and I'd open that up for others, is that we have a limited time, and humans tend to be quite fickle with we have a short memory. in these instances.
Great, Derek. Yes, indeed, we have very short memories, unfortunately. I think that intersect between the use of technology, but enhancing people's skills so that we're actually, it's what Brenda was speaking about, a just transition. So, we don't have technology taking over, but that it works in tandem to increase productivity with people is so fundamental to Africa, given our demographics. Let me ask Nilgun to come in here, and before that, please, guys, do fill in the evaluation form which has been posted in the chat box. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. We are already 2 minutes over time, but I had deferred some of my examples, and I will try to give them along your questions. You asked, what is the challenge of trade over borders for circular economy to be implemented in a just way? One has to redefine what is waste and what is not waste. Some component, for example, being transported over different jurisdictions may be considered waste somewhere and not waste in another place. For instance, very valuable, what we call remanufacturing cores, like car engines, which could be remanufactured to the standard quality level and provided with the warranty of as new engines. So there is a lot to do there to looking into what is waste, what is not waste, what are secondary materials. And UNIDO is working with contributing to the WTO discussions on exactly this. On your question about how we can increase manufacturing in Africa, let me give an example from an EU-funded UNIDO project in North Africa. We worked with 125 companies in 8 countries, and they on implementing circular economy and resource efficiency measures. And what happened is that now these companies are saving every year 200 tons of CO2, 34 tons of raw materials, 3.5 million cubic meters of water, including, of course, industrial wastewater production reduction annually. And in financial terms, that meant they could save 42 million euros per year jointly. And they were able to leverage an additional 88 million euros for investments in new technologies. So how did we do that? We did it together with the cleaner production centers in those countries. And South Africa has a very capable National Cleaner Production Center, which has been doing the same in South Africa since its inception. So circular economy and resource efficiency measures save money, and they leverage investments. So policy should promote that. And along that, as you do that, you also create new jobs for a lot of engineers, because a cleaner production center cannot do it by itself. It has to recruit and train engineers and deploy them. And these engineers then help establish new companies or provide services. So another activity we have in South Africa, also together with the Cleaner Production Center, is eco-industrial parks. We're working in selected parks, as my colleague Chifipas mentioned. He mentioned special economic zones, but in eco-industrial parks, you can implement, or they could be the seedbed for implementing circular economy and resource efficiency solutions. And one could also integrate to these eco-industrial park initiatives nature-based infrastructure and nature-based solutions so that you can, while you're cutting pollution and emissions, you also can enrich and restore the environment. Finally, final two things I will say. In South Africa, there are a lot of companies associated with the automotive manufacturing who remanufacture components and parts with the warranties, but lower price, because you don't start from scratch, you start from a used part for the after sales market. There are companies doing, manufacturing roof tiles from plastic waste. There is an industrial symbiosis exchange for trade of useful byproducts among different manufacturers. And finally, South Africa has excellent innovation capabilities. For instance, the CSIR has been working on, for instance, sawdust to create artificial sweeteners, or with pine oil, or with nanocrystalline cellulose, all from waste. And South Africa has created an exemplary extended producer responsibility scheme,
vou ter que intervir agora.
which is going to promote circularity. Finally, South Africa has joined the Global Alliance for Circular Economy and Resource Efficiency, together with other G20, G7 countries, including the whole of the European Union, which started promoting globally circular economy as an integral part of our response to climate change, as an integral part of our response to a green recovery, biodiversity loss and pollution. And GASARE, we call it shortly, is backstopped by UNIDO and UNEP in collaboration with the European Commission. With that, I thank you all again, and apologies for taking another 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks, Nook, and also here some very useful points that build on the comments of Chifipa and Darag. Brenda, any very, very brief final remarks from you? Brenda?
Sorry. Yeah, thank you very much. Indeed, my comments really would actually echo what Mr. Mhango said. Really, if I had time, I would share best practices in terms of what Mpumalanga is doing to ensure that we improve manufacturing and throughout the different value chains, and to promote trade across borders. Because indeed, due to our strategic location with the Swaziland and Mozambique, we have a number of lessons to share in terms of what would it take to achieve this. However, I would indicate that using the examples of the gas pipeline, which goes from South Africa to Mozambique, going through Maputo, using the experience of us having established an SEZ just about 10 kilometers away from the border of Mozambique, what this has meant in terms of working with these neighboring countries. I would say that it takes a bit of really decisiveness at a political level, because once we realized that it has to start by looking at signing memorandum of understanding, identifying areas of cooperation, because by identifying those areas of cooperation, it limits the thinking that as African countries, we are competing as neighbors. And by looking at areas of cooperation, you then support each other in the sectors where the other country is much more competitive, and you are able to share the skills and knowledge in terms of promoting some of the emerging industries. So it really requires some bit of engagement and acceptance by the countries, especially neighboring ones, that there is value in talking to each other. There is value in creating partnerships and creating platforms where these opportunities are discussed, especially because there are also issues of regulation that actually limit the trading between the two countries. And I've noted that in the case of the SEZ, we are establishing with regards to what challenges we would have in terms of taking our goods to Mozambique because of their harbor, which is actually more efficient than the one that we want to use in Durban. There really needs to be some flexibility and cooperation between the countries for us to be able to achieve an improved manufacturing and improved trade across borders. Thank you, Chairperson.
Great. Thanks very much, Brenda. I'm really sorry. You know, this is a conversation that can probably take a whole morning. I think there's been it's really been fascinating. Before I hand over to the ambassador to make some closing remarks, let me, from my side, thank the panel. You guys have been excellent, notwithstanding some of the technical challenges. I've enjoyed listening to you. Just to flag some of the points that have been raised at the Institute, at the South African Institute of International Affairs, we've been doing quite a bit of work over the last couple of years on issues around e-mobility and batteries and so on for Southern Africa and what that would mean in terms of a future scenario. And of course, also some of the points around nature-based solutions and ecosystem adaptation and so on, as well as many dimensions of climate finance. So I would urge you all to visit our website and type in keywords that you might be interested in to see some of the publications. They're all available for free. I would type in, but I can't quite do that on my phone at the moment. So a very big thank you from my side. Maybe Ambassador, I'll hand over to you with 3 points. I think what I've taken away from here very powerfully is that, you know, we clearly need to produce differently, and this is what the seminar was about. We need to consume differently, and most certainly when we're talking about a just transition, we need to redistribute differently. So thank you very much to all and to our partners in this endeavor. And let me hand over to Ambassador Carvalho for final remarks. Over to you, sir.
Elizabeth, thank you very much. Thank you for the various, participants. Yes, indeed. I mean, this is a conversation to be continued. As I said, I mean, this is talks, but this is talks that lead to action. Because, I've heard, for instance, on the amount of wastage I produce just by doing my normal life, which makes me think again next time I'm going to, do some trivial gestures, trivial steps in my daily routines. I will think even harder on how to reduce wastage, packaging, or the many different ways, and perhaps we can have a further conversation on how we can adjust our behavior, on how we need to adjust our behavior. That's a universal remark that, of course, covers Africa. Also focusing on, more closely focusing on Africa, we heard about, for instance, on when Mpumalanga was talking about cross-border cooperation possibilities, and the reference to Mozambique was made. Mr. Mhango mentioned the importance, for instance, of trying to create favorable conditions for production, for manufacturing, through the use of special economic zones, encouraging production and creating, I don't think the word was used, Okay. Am I back? I think I went out for a short little moment, but I'm back. The notion of creating special economic zones where you can create clusters and where you can put in practice the notion of cross-border production, and also bringing together the various components so as to reduce the length of supply chains. There were many other aspects that were referred to, including the remarkable capabilities that South Africa has in terms of industry or research in the various areas. The CSIR was mentioned, and rightly so. And all of these, I think, are inputs into the bigger discussion that we have to have, because it's not going to finish here, on Africa's green future. I think we have drawn a number of inspiration or points of inspiration for the high-level event that is going to be taking place on the 23rd of April. And with that, I would say that this Green Talk has served its purpose, and my thanks to all the participants, and perhaps if I may transmit it to the Secretary of State and for the Portuguese presidency to take these messages on board and to transmit them to the high-level forum. Mr. Secretary of State, I wonder if you'd like to say some closing words. Thank you very much. I think we can finish here with my thanks to all the participants. So you may turn on perhaps your cameras just to wave goodbye to all of you and to say that we remain in touch. For those that are in South Africa, I suggest that one of these days, if you come close to Pretoria, you may COVID rules, being applied, share a drink and a conversation here at my house in Pretoria. You are already invited, and perhaps we can pursue the conversations that we started, between Mpumalanga, Joburg, and Pretoria, and notably when our friend Jim comes down here. So look forward to see you all, and you are in advance all invited to come to my house. Thank you very much. And let's keep in touch. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye to all.